not trying to defuse.
Hi, Kevin. Can you test your audio?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thanks.
Okay. So Lauren, anything in black on the script is yours? Hey, Lauren, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Just a question. Do I assume my chairmanship this meeting, or is it mid-year, or?
It's this meeting, so you're gonna run it.
Okay, that's what I thought. In the script, you have under the roll call, you have Kate is still the chair, but
Oh,
it was my assumption going in that I would run the meeting, so.
yeah, sorry, that was my quick
Okay.
save as. I didn't catch that. I'll make sure to say it correctly. Hi, Ernest. Thanks for joining us. You're welcome to just turn your camera off until your item. it'll take us probably 10, 15 minutes to get through the first couple things.
You're on mute, Ernest.
Hi, thanks, Lauren.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah.
So screen share is enabled, and when my item does come up, I'll be free to screen share the presentation. And
Who can share? Yeah, you should be able to share now.
okay, yeah, looks good.
Hi, Phil, can you test your audio?
Howdy, can you hear me?
We can. Good to see you. Hi, Mark, can you test your audio? Looks like you're still connecting, actually.
Phil, where's your partner tonight?
My little girls,
Yeah.
they're taking a bath right
Oh.
now. I'm sure they will be here to join me before it's before bedtime. We're coming off a couple weeks of COVID hitting all of us hard, so.
Sorry to hear that, but at least it sounds like it's over though.
Yeah,
I
everyone's
mean, it's over
totally
for
healthy.
you. I mean,
Yeah, we like split up to isolate, which just
Mhm.
meant my youngest and my wife tested positive at day 9. So we just
wow.
extended out as long as possible, but everybody's doing fine now, which is good, lucky.
Good to hear.
So my 2-year-old's been good forever, but she's like tested positive still at day 5, then at day 7, so she can't go back to school for a long time. It's been a whole thing. But
Well, I guess you're good for 90 days, right?
I thought it could be our first vacation that we take in 2 years now, so I gotta plan something. Yeah, I was the worst. I mean, I'm vaccinated and boosted, and I was the worst off. I was quite sick, but for a long time, but finally better. Get to ride my bike again.
So Phil, are you going to be able to give an update on the Greenway
Yes, indeed.
committee? Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah, it'll be just a short one, but
Yeah. Good evening,
Hi.
Bill.
Yeah, hi, Bill. You are welcome to hang out, turn your camera off until your item or the item Ernest is presenting. It'll probably take us like 10 or 15 minutes to get to that one. But thank you so much for joining. Oh, yes, Anne, if you could.
Can you read that or is that backwards?
It's forwards. You're good. I can read it.
I'm good.
Okay, so it's 6 o'clock. A quorum would be, I don't even know how many members there are right now. Hold on. I think we need one more to actually be a quorum.
You know any member who's not going to be here tonight?
DJ will not be here. And then I'll make an announcement after we start the meeting, but the youth position, the term ended. So Tyler will have to reapply, and we just didn't have everything together to do interviews today.
Okay. I know Kate said she was coming.
I'm here. I'll put my camera on if I must.
think we
Kevin,
have
you
a-
have a quorum now, so you're welcome to start.
Okay, welcome to the regular meeting of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Group. This is Tuesday, February 1st, 2021, and it's 6:01. I request that traffic engineer Lauren Devaney call the roll.
Thanks. Member Allison? Member Bergman?
Here.
Chair Haggerty?
Here,
Member Mooney?
Here.
Member Powers?
Here.
Member Solomon?
Here.
And alternate member Coyne.
Here,
Because member Allison is gone, alternate member Coyne will serve as a voting member, although I don't think we have anything, we're not voting on anything except for minutes tonight. I do want to make a note that the youth position term ended, and we hope to conduct interviews for the position at the next meeting. Let me get through my blurb here. So this meeting is being held virtually, and viewers are welcome to provide public comment online or by telephone at 669-900-9128. The meeting ID is 865-1838-2152 pound with password 071169. If you are watching the meeting and wish to provide public comment, please select the participants icon and select raise hand. If you are participating by telephone and wish to provide public comments, please press *9 when the chair opens the public comment period. When it is your time to speak, you will hear a notification that you have been unmuted. Press *6 to unmute yourself, and you'll have 2 minutes to speak.
okay, the second item on the agenda is approval of meeting minutes. Are there any, do any members have any questions regarding the last meeting minutes? If not, are there any members of the public who have comments on the meeting minutes? Okay, if not, I'm going to close the discussion. Lauren, would you please call the roll call?
Yeah, I'll do it quickly. And are there any objections to the meeting minutes? If there are, speak up now. Okay, we'll call them approved.
Okay. Next item is public comment on items not on the agenda. If there are, you're limited to 2 minutes each. This is the time for the public to comment on topics not on the agenda. We value public attendance and participation at all BPAC meetings. Thank you for attending. In accordance with the Brown Act, BPAC will not discuss items that were not on the agenda, but your comments will be noted in the meeting. Hold on 1 sec here. Will be noted in the meeting minutes. In some cases, DPW staff may reach out directly regarding specific concerns, and some topics may become agenda items for future BPAC meetings. Your comments must be limited to 2 minutes. I'm going to make an effort to stick to that schedule. And Ann is going to be our timer. So if you are speaking, she'll hold up her phone with the amount of time left. Lauren?
Thanks, Kevin. If you wish to speak, please either use the raise hand function, or if you are on the telephone, press *9. Everyone's got the raised hand down. So Warren Wells.
Hi, everyone. Chair Haggerty, members of the commission. This is Warren Wells, Policy and Plan Director for the Marin County Bicycle Coalition. Just calling in to talk about some somber news. As many of you may have heard, there was a fatal collision on Saturday the 29th on Sir Francis Drake Boulevard between Woodacre and Fairfax. I realize that's out of the jurisdiction of this body, but but being a bicyclist who was killed in Marin, I think it is germane. This is another, the person who died, who's a pastor in San Francisco, Greg Chisholm. He leaves behind a wife, daughter, and his church community. You know, his name is another in a long line of growing roadway violence. Traffic fatalities are their highest in 25 years, and the past decade has seen a 50% increase in bike and pedestrian deaths. And Marin County is no exception to this. In 2010, there were 48 people killed or seriously injured on our county's roads, and we've nearly doubled that number. And so I wanted to call this body's attention to a document released by the U.S. Department of Transportation under Pete Buttigieg. They released what's called they're calling their National Roadways Safety Strategy, and it outlines a series of actions that the federal DOT is going to be taking to try to reduce the number of deaths on our roadways to zero. And I'm not going to read portions here. We don't have time for this, but I encourage you to look it up. I'll be posting about it on the MCPC website. But really, one part in particular calls out the link between climate change and roadway safety. And by having dangerous roads, we have it calls out a chilling effect that people who would otherwise be walking, biking, or taking transit feel like they have to stay in their car to keep themselves safe. So with that, I will conclude my comments, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Warren. Are there any
Okay.
more public comments?
Yeah, there's two more.
Okay.
Craig Murray, and then I think I sent out some material that Craig had emailed me. He's gonna use public comment to elaborate.
Chair Haggerty, BPAC members, good evening. Craig Murray, you could hear me? Acknowledge. Okay, thank you. Just wanted to report back that Lauren invited me to participate in the Safe Routes of Transit, and particular focus in North Santa Fe and getting kids safely from the west side of 101 over the east side in Benicia Valley. So the document was sent out tonight. Fine, Lauren, if you want to put that in the chat for others attending tonight to see that. It's basically a survey of a potential route, working with City of Santa Fe, Caltrans, SMART. I spoke with General Counsel, see if they're have any interest outside their fence line at that undercrossing at the Civic Center, and then routing over to Benicia Valley, principally on Class 1 trails or trails that are outside of public traffic interaction. And then just for the committee's interest, Benicia Valley has 8 inverted U-racks and 3 lockers in front of their building, but the kids would be coming in the back of the building. There's a locked fence. So we're going to do a survey and work with the community to continue to make improvements and connect up that trail. And then second item is I just want to share greetings with Richmond. So Richmond BPAC has a pretty robust new website one of their members has put together. It's simply rbpac.org. So there's some great resources there. And then also Contra Costa CCTA has for the Bay Area, and particularly Contra Costa, put together an e-bike rebate program that may be of interest, and perhaps one that could be patterned in Marin. And there's a really good detail of getting people off regular bikes on the e-bikes, and how that helps people start to use that alternative transportation. So that's the end of my report. Thanks very much. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Craig.
And then one more public comment, Lori.
Hello, I just wanted to ask Lauren what you had said, something, I missed the comment. You said something about something is going to be postponed until next month and something is over or finished. In the very beginning, you said, I don't know if you were talking about a thing or a person.
That was going to be interviews for the new youth member position.
Perfect,
for the
thank
BPAC.
you. That's what I missed. Thank you. Well done.
Are there any more comments? No. We'll close the public comment section. The next item is the ad hoc committee updates. First committee is the Northwest Greenway Committee. Phil, do you have an update?
Yeah, I have a short update on the North-South Greenway Committee. Again, this was just our committee to keep an eye on what's happening in the North-South Greenway so we can talk about our little role as it comes through San Rafael, which we're going to be talking about tonight. Starting from the south, the last couple of meetings, we've talked about the Vista Point project right under the Golden Gate Bridge to connect the two sides of the Golden Gate Bridge. Some of that funding was in the Build Back Better Act, which didn't pass, but it looks like the Golden Gate Bridge District and the National Park are hoping to move forward with that project in 2023. Just moving further north to the Corte Madera Creek Bridge. Again, this is the bridge over Corte Madera Creek, sort of near the Larkspur Ferry that they've been working on. It's been delayed by about 5 months because they found a bunch of unmapped facilities, but it's still going along and it should open in the late spring or early summer. So that's, if you ride or drive by, you'll see they're getting pretty close on that. There's going to be lots to talk about here in San Rafael with the San Rafael Connection project at the top of Puerto Zuelo Hill. And so we have Zune is going to talk to us about that today, of course. Up in Novato, there's still the lawsuit that SMART has against it for building out the path, which has stalled the Mcginnis to Smith Ranch section of the path, and then the Roland Boulevard over by Costco. So I think those are just in limbo as they're waiting for those lawsuits to end. That's it for me.
Thank you, Phil. The next sub ad hoc committee is the Vision Zero Committee. Kate, do you have an update?
Yes, I do. Part of it is to jettison off of what Warren said about Pete Buttigieg recent announcement about the National Roadway Safety Strategy, which is modeled after a systems approach that Vision Zero uses. As a committee, Barry and Kevin and I haven't met since our last meeting, but regionally there are some efforts that are in setting the groundwork for us to move ahead with the Vision Zero policy. The MTC Regional Active Transportation Network investment strategy is a strategy to build out the Complete Streets Network, as well as to advance a regional Vision Zero policy approach to both street design and reducing speeds. And so not only did Plan Bay Area have a transportation strategy in it, but MTC is moving forward in a regional way. And then finally, where we are right now is, to my knowledge, Rafat is working on a description of a type of Vision Zero program that, from his perspective and DPW's perspective, the city of San Rafael could adopt. So we want to, make complete networks that are safe and comfortable and support safety. And this is in the context of not only a national, but a regional priorities going forward. That's my report.
So thank you, Kate. Just one part of that, this committee is going to continue to look at that issue, and then we're hoping to, at some future meeting, to bring back to the BPAC some recommendations and to get your comments and possibly make a recommendation on. Does any of the BPAC members have any questions on these topics? Or I guess this is the appropriate time to ask staff for comments on any related projects. Any questions? Okay. If not, does the public, are there any comments from the public?
No hands raised right now. Oh, Jean Severinghouse.
Hi, good evening, everybody. The MTC's new active transportation network map. The deadline was yesterday to get input in, and people gave a lot of very knowledgeable input from Marin. I don't know exactly what we'll end up with, but their initial priority is within a half a mile of priority development areas that are economically disadvantaged, namely the whole PDA around the canal. That's what's prioritized for MTC funding for the next 5 years. So that's actually pretty exciting for Santa Fe if that in fact goes forward. I'm very supportive of that because it's been neglected for a long time. So that's exciting. And the other exciting thing to me, since I live on the south end of that, is that the north-south Greenway on the smart right-of-way south of the corner of Madera Creek, south of the new bridge that's just about to be finished, is included in that half-mile network for funding. So I'm really looking forward to us getting that all ages and abilities trail, getting the environmental work done on the smart right-of-way, and moving it forward. We can't really move forward until it gets that environmental work done. So I'm hoping that we can advocate to get funding, get an ATP application for the smart segment to get that study done so we can move forward on that piece. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jean. With that, I'm going to close this section, this agenda item. The next agenda item, which is the major item of discussion tonight, is the north-south Greenway gap closure. And I would like to ask Ernest Clark to introduce himself. And I think Bill Gamlin from SMART is also here tonight.
Sure,
Ernest?
and if I could start the item, Kevin.
Sure.
If it's okay. So this is the another gap closure from Puerto Zuelo path up to where the trail starts near Ranch Road. And the city and SMART together, we're working on a feasibility study to figure out the best alignment in this area. And that is being done with the help of Ernest Clark from Zune Engineering. And we have Bill Gamlin here from SMART. Thank you so much, Bill, for coming. And Ernest Clark. Bill, if you want to say anything else before Ernest introduces himself and jumps into his presentation, it's all yours.
Sure. Thanks, Lauren. Thanks a lot for having us this evening. Ernest is, as Lauren mentioned, is going to walk us through the details of the Puerto Zuelo feasibility study, in which we looked at several different routes. It's been a great collaborative effort with MCBC, WTB, TAM. We kicked off a field exercise where we walked the whole area, looked at things, then kind of turned Ernest loose. So I'm going to let Ernest get into the details. I did want to follow up with Phil's update on the smart path from Mcginnis Road up to Smith Branch Road and just give you an update on where we are with that. As you all probably know, because I know you follow things closely, we did receive an MTC Quick Strikes grant to fund the construction of that segment. So we will be awarding a contract tomorrow with the board to complete the design of that segment and do all the permitting work while we work with the FTA to get that construction funding allocated. So we're going to push both forward at the same time. Permitting is probably going to take us about a year on that. That's a lot of sensitive areas out there with wetlands and species habitat. So probably looking at construction in 2023 on that, but that's where we are. So with that, I'd turn it over to Ernest.
Thank you, Bill. Everyone hear me okay? Great. Thank you, Chair Hegarty and members of the committee. My name is Ernest Clark. I'm with Zune Engineering. I've been with Zune for 2 years, but I come to you with 20 years of public agency experience. I was an engineer at the County of Marin from the year 2000. And I was instrumental in implementing projects like the Cal Park Hill Tunnel and the Central Marin Ferry Connector. So among many other road paving projects, I know I've worked with Kevin in the past on some Point San Pedro stuff. So it's good to see everyone. And I've been riding bikes in Marin since 1977. So I was very pleased that I was able to work with Bill and the city on this project. I know we only have an hour, so it's a pretty long report. I'm gonna try and run through the highlights and then leave as much time as possible for questions and answers so we can dig into the details of any segments that are of interest to the group. Just make sure everyone can see my presentation. Can everyone see that okay?
Yep.
Great. Okay, so yeah, this first cover page, just going to take a minute here to orient everybody with where we are. The Puerto Zuelo Hill Tunnel is here. The existing smart track is here. And this is Highway 101 heading south. So this map is sort of oriented looking south. And I'll apologize in advance if my head's on a swivel here. I'm turning to a larger screen that's much easier to draw on and navigate for this presentation. We looked at different colored segments, and I'll just highlight for this overview map. The reason they're different colors is because the sort of concept cross sections, the topography, the constraints associated with each are unique to these different colors. And so by combining different color segments, we can get a continuous route. There's no distinct one color that indicates a full route. It's a combination of colors, as you'll see on the preceding slides. Real quick, the project goals were to create routes that are compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act, targeting a 5% running slope, provide pedestrian and bicycle dual use facilities to the greatest extent feasible, where there weren't avoidable constraints, meet the reference standard. The Caltrans Highway Design Manual defines a class 2 path with certain dimensions, stay within property line and right-of-way constraints using Marin map as a GIS-based property boundary constraint tool, preserve parking in existing roadway lane configurations to the greatest extent feasible, and avoid utility relocations to the greatest extent feasible. The highlight reason for taking this approach is really just to look at all the alternatives and identify sort of feasible routes without additional study. As the report was being developed and as I started digging in, I found that there was a need to do significant more stakeholder coordination to come up with solutions to some of the identified constraints. So really at this level, the report as is gives the stakeholders some options of routes to study further, but there is definitely more analysis needed to further the results of this and get to design level documents and hit all the constraints. So this is an aerial view of the study area highlighted in yellow. The existing Caltrans class 1 path is denoted by this pink line. It kind of ends at the top of Marydale here in this location and joins the roadway. That was one of the first connection points for the pathway alternatives. And then the existing smart class 1 path is here at the bottom of the document. And that was the terminus or other connection point to this study. In looking at the routes, we came up with 3 alternatives. So they're, for lack of a better naming convention, it's this green route, the Marydale North San Pedro route, that comes down through this green segment, connects to a light blue segment along Marydale, and then ultimately connects to North San Pedro Road going this way. Though not officially part of the study, we did notice that there is a vital link to get this eastern connection over to Marin Civic Center, Venetia Valley School. And so we did analyze a short segment that we termed as light blue here to make that connection and not leave cyclists traveling eastbound stranded at this intersection. But really the analysis does look at the Marydale North San Pedro route as one continuous route to connect down to the smart path here. The next route is what we're terming the Pilgrim Way Route. That one grabs the green segment, goes through Pilgrim Way and an apartments utilizing some easements, as we'll see in the analysis, and then comes down onto North San Pedro Road. And then the third route is the Caltrans Smart Right-of-Way Route. That one utilizes an existing Caltrans parcel, uses a series of switchbacks to get down to the smart right-of-way grade and then travels along what we're terming the smart berm all the way over to North San Pedro here. Get my line work. And then we'll go ahead and move into the different segments and the concept cross sections. Sorry, before we do that, the executive summary does talk quite a bit about it highlights the constraints associated with the route. I'm going to skip forward just a little bit and highlight what could be a useful tool in planning, getting some input from stakeholders about a performance score weighed against a cost estimate to come up with like a value score for each alternative. And so what I do is, as I go through and develop each of these routes, I find performance goals criteria that can impact the feasibility of a route and or the user experience and all of the constraints associated with implementing this. If it were desired, you could assign criteria scores to each of these and try to weigh the segments in that way, maybe in a public forum or another forum where people could give feedback. This part of the report goes in and discusses the rationale for each of those different criteria, how it's developed and how they could be used to analyze these routes. And then in the executive summary, we just have a summary table here that highlights all the areas needing further study for the different segments. Again, if you combine these different segments, you get a continuous route down from Highway 101 path to the smart right-of-way existing Class 1 at Los Ranchitos and North San Pedro. So let's look at the first green segment. Again, this is a little plan view. It utilizes an existing Caltrans parcel, probably left over from the freeway development. This segment traverses, it uses a portion of the top of Marydale Road, traverses the hillside and comes out right at this Pilgrim Way sort of entrance. The green segment here has characteristics. One of the main hard things to do with this green segment is to fit the pathway in at the top of Marydale. So there's a couple things at play here. This is the end of the existing pathway. We all know that that pathway is pretty steep, although it is 8% with turnouts to meet ADA. Caltrans, I believe, built this path many years ago. And when it exits here, the roadway grade becomes quite steep. And so when I went out and measured, as evidenced by this pink line, sort of with some smart tools, found a way to get a 5% grade pathway from the terminus of the existing bike path onto this Caltrans parcel. And to do that, we need to fill in. And this is kind of what the concept cross-section looks like. This is the existing freeway sound wall. This is 101 southbound. And this would be what this sort of fill area would look like. Unfortunately, without significantly modifying Marydale, doing parking impacts, moving center lines, looking at utility relocations, and impacting the ability for fire trucks to use the turnaround here. Without doing that, we're left with an 8-foot path. And so you do lose some of that Caltrans design standard, the 2-foot shoulders for pedestrians to walk. And so rather than look at reconfiguring the whole Marydale intersection and having all those impacts, this is one example of how the study analyzes losing those 2-foot shoulders for this very short segment to be able to come up with a more feasible project. And that's discussed in more detail in the verbiage of the report. As you transition out of the top of Marydale here, and you get onto this dirt parcel, you can immediately transition into the standard pathway width. And that's a 12-foot wide path, 8-foot paved, 2-foot shoulders on either side. It's envisioned that you'll have short wood retaining walls on one side and a guardrail on the other due to the steep terrain. This is a highlight of that area where you would transition out. Again, the idea being maintain this 12-foot lane, maintain this parking along this side, stay away from moving these utility poles and having a lot more impacts associated. The study doesn't go on to say that it's not feasible to do these other things. All the study says is that if you want to do things like that, maintaining that 12-foot standard all the way through Marydale, you need to make some concessions and work with the stakeholders on that, namely City of Santa Fe for road widths and Santa Fe Fire for making sure there's adequate access, and the apartment owners across the way to make sure that they're not impacted with some of the informal parking being lost along here. As we come down through some of these switchbacks on the hillside, this is sort of a concept of what that switchback configuration would look like to meet the 12-foot standard. This is kind of a big footprint, but the trade-off being you do get the full pathway width, and this is all accounted for in the project estimates that are provided in the report. Again, just a concept cross-section of what that could look like. If further constraints are identified, you can always make concessions here, but the effort was to fit in this standard 12-foot width anywhere we could. And that is more information about the same. We'll move on to the cyan segment. So this one again, at the end of the green segment here and at Pilgrim Way, we're kind of changing into a more standard suburban roadway cross-section. As we transition out of the green segment and into the cyan segment, we're seeing a change to not needing a retaining wall anymore, probably just a retaining curb. There's a drainage ditch that needs to be filled in and culverted, which is all part of the estimate. And you're now having cyclists get much closer to the travel roadway. So some kind of barrier between the two would be advisable, helpful, make everyone feel more comfortable. Again, as analyzed in the report, we're maintaining the 12-foot minimum lane width here on Marydale to lessen the impacts associated with that. As you move down Marydale, you traverse across a couple of driveways, and those are shown. One of them is shown here, and the other one is kind of here. In order to meet roadway grades, to not create barriers to accessing those driveways with retaining walls or curbs, we're looking at cross-section that kind of looks like this. Again, losing those 2-foot shoulders, but being able to keep the grading such that people can still enter their driveways. It is definitely acknowledged that this pathway will traverse these driveways. And so never a great idea to have these conflicting movements, but somewhat unavoidable with this route. And so you could get creative with colorization. You could also include some bollards on the roadway to highlight cyclists and signage and lighting to make sure that those areas are highlighted where those conflicts might exist. As we move down into the intersection, the light blue segment does continue on through to the intersection of North San Pedro and Marydale. This intersection is controlled by Caltrans, is my understanding, and so any changes to this and significant changes or minor changes require Caltrans permission. I'm working with Caltrans on what they have planned here. Again, just trying to hold the islands that they have and hold the existing constraints, not move signal poles. Those can be very costly, although Caltrans may have plans for moving that, so that could be considered. As you come into the intersection, there's some options to deal with treating this intersection. This is one concept as you come off of Marydale Road and are making that connection eastward to Venetia Valley. This is that light blue segment that we talked about being optional, but this is one way to treat this to maintain ADA access and kind of allow for bicyclists and peds to mix in this area. There are probably many options. This was just one that came to mind, and there's definitely right of way and space space here to fit all this in. This is the existing island, and so you have the right of way line back here in yellow. Lots of room in here to make these types of improvements, and there could be others. Again, just wanting to reach out with Caltrans, the city, maybe the county, and see where the opportunities are here to come up with different alternatives. As we get into the intersection and consider going, let's see where we're going next. This is that concept. Yeah, you can see just how much room there is here and what the intersection currently looks like. Yeah, and we'll go over the light blue segment real quick. So this, as you turn east, that would be going this direction in the photo. There's, again, plenty of room to be able to provide retaining wall and a separated path with the guardrail. This guardrail is similar to how it's treated underneath the freeway, and so extending that seemed feasible. Again, for roadway width, we're looking at deleting those 2-foot shoulder sections to keep everything within the roadway, but with further analysis, surveys, getting the striping, and working with Caltrans on what they're comfortable with, you may be able to fit back those 2-foot shoulders on either side for this option. As demonstrated in this photo, you do have a lot of room here. And then as we turn west onto North San Pedro, we're looking at this segment between the Marydale intersection and the Los Ranchitos intersection. This area is significantly constrained by the number of through vehicle lanes and cars parked on the road and turning movements into Sequoia, which is a roadway that heads into some townhomes just before Ranchitos. So the concept here really is just improvements to what's out there. Again, I thought about removing the parking and creating a lot of changes out here, but to maintain all these movements became very difficult without further surveys and information, but more importantly, feedback from the agencies about whether some of these things can move or not. And so there are significant opportunities if the agencies identify that parking is not needed along this side. You can look at getting creative with things like shifting the whole roadway to the south and putting a dedicated Class 1 facility in place of the sidewalk that is on the north side. You can flip this configuration and have this whole Class 1 facility located on this side if you're taking the parking here. So there are quite a few options if you look at doing this, but really that was outside of the scope of this study. And what I'm just showing is that these are some feasible alternatives. If you get some constraints from the stakeholders, hire a designer, get some surveys, accurately identify that right of way, and work with the utilities to see if they're willing to move some of the constraints, you really start opening up these options in this short segment. The last thing that's acknowledged in the report is that the CPUC will require signalization of this intersection at the existing smart crossing. Where exactly that signal lands is very important, would require further study. There are some ideas to put that signal here at the Sequoia entrance to these townhomes. It's very close to the existing train crossing here by Los Ranchitos and close to the Los Ranchitos signal itself. So there's a lot more stakeholder coordination that needs to happen to vet sort of the viability of this, what it looks like, and whether the Class 2 as shown in the report or a Class 1 really works better here. So again, the report is just trying to highlight all the constraints necessary to move this segment to the next phase. This is the Pilgrim Way segment. So as we leave Marydale here from the green and cyan segments that we talked about, we're heading down into a residential area. Really, the reason that this one was even looked at, I'll go out right now and just say it's pretty infeasible. It was, however, identified in the Santa Fe's bike ped plan as a viable segment. It's represented by these lines. It appears to utilize existing access easement for Pilgrim Way, an MMWD potential easement, and some other type of easement here. Whether or not it's a good idea to put cyclists into this area, and if the private property owner would cooperate, and the nature of those easements needs to be further investigated. And so at this point, we don't see, I personally, when I did the report, I didn't see this as really a feasible segment requiring a lot of additional study. to make sure that this works, but it was looked at due to its identification in the Santa Fe bike ped plan. This orange segment is just to hop up from there and get into the smart right away. If ever there was an opportunity to just get off of the blue segment here out of the parking lot and come up onto the smart berm, that might make it a little bit more palatable, but that's just there as a highlight of what further you need to study to get that feasible. This red segment then tails off from it, basically the smart berm from the North San Pedro roadway at Los Ranchitos, coming along the smart berm. This segment's pretty easy to visualize. There's a lot of room on the berm right now. It kind of lends itself. The grade is not difficult to achieve, that 5% running slope, and the pathway width fits just fine. It would require a 15-foot separation from the edge of the rail to the edge of the path, and some kind of fence for safety and exclusion of users from the rail corridor. There is some pathway alignment issues associated with this green utility box. I don't know what that is or if it could be moved easily, but some of the concepts for doing that to maintain the 15-foot width and to jog the path around this, again, losing those 2-foot shoulders for this short segment, tapering down, narrowing the path slightly. Then may have the benefit of having, this jog may also have the benefit of slowing people down before they're getting to this intersection and having to make this decision. So a lot of this connection still needs to be worked out, especially in tandem with where that signal goes. Does it go here at Sequoia? Is it going right here at the smart crossing, and the interaction with the existing signal at Ranchitos? Almost done here. Thank you for your patience. This yellow segment is very similar to this section 2.9 yellow segment. This was Zune's take on what it takes to get down the hill, and it's very similar to WTB TAM's take of what it takes to get down this hillside. So I'll just highlight the constraints associated with both. The alignments are similar, the costs are similar, and the constraints are all very similar. One of the general, as you come down most of this Caltrans parcel, again, to orient everybody, this is the existing pathway on 101. This is the Marydale, sort of top of Marydale cul-de-sac. And this path diverges as quickly as possible to come across this Caltrans parcel and down into the right-of-way. This area right here is an area of steep terrain. And so, sorry, before we get there, this is what the path would look like along most of this yellow alignment. It's a very low retaining wall, and the pathway standard can fit. In this area of steep terrain and concern, this is one concept for how you could switch back that all the way down. This is quite a big footprint, and there's some significant grading. The retaining wall heights are anticipated to go from 2 to 10 feet. So there are some things to consider when implementing this type of solution to coming down off of this hillside. I'll just highlight a couple things. SMART has some existing soil nail geotechnical stabilization measures here. Those could conflict with some of the alignment that we're talking about, because those soil nails go down into the ground, and this solution would involve piers and retaining walls getting into that. There may be some concerns with that. WTB TAM also identified these areas of geotechnical instability. WTB TAM does a good job of aligning their path around these to avoid most of these, but you do get into that some of here. This is not, these aren't showstoppers. These are just things that need to be considered when furthering design of this alternative. And then one of the major constraints associated with both these alternatives through this segment is this existing gas line. We're aware of it. PG&E has rights to be here, presumably through an easement agreement or some kind of legal land right to be there. And so investigating that easement language and what rights they have to be there will impact the feasibility of this. So furthering those conversations with PG&E would help iron those out. And so WTB TAM has very good grading analysis here, and what they think the retaining wall heights, as you can see, they are mostly 2 to 3 to 4 feet, but in some areas get as high as 10 feet. as well as the cuts as deep as 8 feet. And that's consistent with Zune's analysis of the yellow segment. Yeah, and then the report just goes on to summarize how you link the different segments. Again, highlighting this as an optional connector. The yellow-red route being the next one. And then a consideration for including many of the project elements to link the corridor, not only north-south, which was the purpose of the study, but also east-west with some improvements on North San Pedro, including that connector all the way over to the Highway 101. And the conclusion goes ahead and just highlights all those next steps that you want to do with the stakeholders. And then the report goes on to include detailed estimates. So with that, I'm happy to keep the share open in case people want to go back to documents, but open it up for questions.
Thanks, Ernest. Do any of our members have questions? Lauren, maybe I can't see the hands or anything, so maybe you could call on people that,
Kevin, this is Mark.
yes, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. First of all, Ernest, fantastic. That was great. I appreciate you, the way you walked us through that. I really got a good understanding of what you're trying to do and the alternatives, and it looks like you put a lot of thought into it. So thank you very much. I just had maybe a general question, a couple of general questions for you and Bill. When, in terms of, you showed early on the performance goal criteria. How was that established, or who established that? Was that a stakeholder thing, or is that something you work with SMART on?
It was not developed with anyone but myself. Really, as I go through each of these segments, I did a lot of field visits and I did a lot of research on what was there. I identified these criteria as being key to the feasibility of any segment, and that includes geotechnical risks, utility conflicts, environmental impacts, tree removal, proximity to private property, noise, lighting, things that might trigger like an EIR level document, land rights, working with Caltrans on the parcels that they have there, making sure that they're okay with the proposed uses, and then working with the different stakeholders that own the right of way through there. And then looking at rail safety and kind of how the different segments, whether they're right adjacent to the rail in ways that are dissimilar to the existing pathways along the SMART corridor. One example might be this portion of the path. So as you're on the SMART berm right next to the rail, that's very similar to a lot of the different pathway alignments that we have. But as we get further and further away and up this steep terrain, you have to think about if you have like an accident with a child here or something on the path, how do you get emergency response personnel down to that area? It's much removed from roadways, it's far out, and it's on this long sort of circuitous route along this pathway. So when compared to other routes, that may be a consideration for scoring it differently than these other alignments. And that's all the intent is there, is to highlight where people might rank certain criteria in this. And the last being user experience, that was given a fairly heavy weight of 35% of the criteria score, because user experience is a very important part, making sure you're giving a cyclist the opportunity to have a good user experience with minimal vehicle interaction. So it was developed in a vacuum to answer your question, but it's definitely changeable. And that's one reason why we don't have criteria scores here, and that there is not an actual value score. The report provides the cost estimates for each of the different segments, but really it's up to SMART and the city to proceed further and assign criteria scores or hold public workshops where those could be developed. That was the intent.
I have an interest here because this is one of my regular bike routes, so I'm familiar with the area pretty well. And this, I gauge what kind of shape I'm in when I return going south there, up the hill. So it's a good one for me. And maybe this is for Bill as much as anything, and Lauren, in terms of the process and the steps that are going to happen here on out. Could you help us tell us a little bit more about the process that has to unfold? and
Sure, I'm happy to
decision-making.
field that.
Thanks, Bill.
So
And
this
good to
was
see you, Bill. Haven't
initiated
seen you in a
by,
while.
I'm sorry,
No, just good to see you. I haven't seen you in a long time.
good to see you guys too. This was initiated by one of our board members, the mayor of Santa Fe. So I think ultimately this is going to circle back to the board, probably in a presentation. Again, the focus was feasibility. Are these paths even feasible? Which I think really ties a lot to the criteria that Ernest just walked us through. We still need to get more input from our working group before we're kind of really ready to roll this report out publicly. We had a working group on it last week and talked through it, but we need to kind of finalize the report. So I think that's where it goes next.
Bill, let me ask you a follow-up question. What kind of time frame are we looking at here to make a decision? Are we a year away, less than that?
Again, I don't know if we're making a decision on what we build. If we build, I think we'd be going back and reporting back to our board and saying, hey, we found that all 3 are feasible, 1's feasible, 2 are feasible. Here's the pros and cons of some of them, and then probably looking for direction. That probably could happen in the next month or so.
Okay, Kate, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I had a couple questions about the Marydale. Can't remember what that section is called. It seemed, it looks like it's pretty steep. Where right there on the page before that, just going up to page, I believe 17. Ernest. Oh no, a little bit further up. One more up.
This one or this?
That one right there.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Number 15. It just looks like the connection from the existing bike path to Marydale. If where it narrows, I guess it's one further up. It looks like people would be coming up the hill from Marydale, and it would go from a 12-foot path to an 8-foot path where people may be on the bike path itself and not visible. I don't know if that's true or not. I can't completely tell from the drawings and the photographs, but that would be one concern of mine. And also, I was wondering if the slope is less than 5% or less after you do the green switchback on the Caltrans property, because that Marydale Road seems pretty steep for most of it. And I'm wondering if the grade is less than 5% after at the point where the switchback meets Marydale Road.
Yes, I actually measured the roadway, and you're talking about right here where green transitions to this cyan color. It was measured at 6%, but really you're looking at getting a survey, and at 6% versus 5%, it's very easy to make up that 1% grade as you grade out this whole project and carry the 5% off of the green and into the cyan and across. It flattens out significantly right out of the frame of this photo and becomes less than 5% all the way down to the intersection.
Okay. And so would that one even be considered ADA feasible for ADA?
Yes, at 5% or less, that meets ADA. You can go as steep as 8% with ADA, similar to what they did, what Caltrans did up here on their pathway, but you have to provide belvederes or rest spots every 50 feet. And so in areas where you do have, that's part of the detailed engineering analysis that occurs when you're designing this. If they identify a 50-foot segment that can be 8% for a little bit to save a utility pole or cutting or any other major expense and or something that affects the feasibility, you have that flexibility.
Okay. And then I just wanted to mention that I was on the BPAC when we did the last master plan update. And I don't remember Pilgrim Way. I don't remember there being a lot of conversation about Pilgrim Way. So I'm wondering if it was a conceptual line that went down in a current alignment, or if, you know, I'm just wondering to what detail Alta went in making, there was a desire to get off of Los Ranchitos and reduce the grade to make it more comfortable and safe. I personally don't remember the Pilgrim Way being called out as the route. And then my last concern is just I do favor the Caltrans Smart route that WTB TAM has also initiated as a, you know, in terms of doing a feasibility study. The way WTB TAM's avoided a lot of the trees. I think the trees provide stability on the slope, especially the first few feet of the soil. I also think that they provide an amenity in terms of shade and beauty of the experience of that ride. So I would encourage going forward, maintaining as many of those native trees as possible on that slope for both of those reasons. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
there's
for the question.
definitely an ideal alignment to be developed that can avoid the trees, the geotechnical concerns, et cetera.
Thank you.
Lauren, I presume the city's been involved in this team that's looking at these alternatives. Would you care to comment on the city's thinking?
Sure, and maybe April can help me out. But yeah, there's still some things we need to figure out. This is a feasibility study, so there's still things we need answers to, like the PG&E utility line that might be under this route that we're looking at. We're gonna support, you know, whatever alignment may work out, and we're still in the exploration phase. So we haven't settled or decided on any one of them.
Okay, well, can you talk a little more about the process that the city will take in in taking a position if that's what you do? I know it's a joint, you'll be working with SMART and Caltrans. But I think BPAC, for example, would be very interested in city staff's take on this, and what kind of process you'll go through to make a recommendation.
Sure, I don't think I have a perfect answer for that yet, but I think we do want to take a look at the scoring criteria and make sure everyone's in agreement on how we're going to score these different alignments. And then I think you look at which one, you know, scores the best. This is being done in collaboration with SMART. We want to make sure that their needs are met. We also will probably have to deal with Caltrans. So there's a lot of agencies and authorities that everyone's going to have to be on the same page. April, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, we're just not there yet. I mean, this is the initial feasibility study. We're just looking at options. And as Ernest went over, there's several things we need to explore further before any of these routes actually become, a legitimate route that we would look into funding and exploring this further. So this is just one of the first steps.
So let me get clarification, and I'll open this up to whoever wants to answer it. Ernest provided a set of criteria, a weighted set of criteria. And Ernest, you said that the scores hadn't been filled in yet. Ultimately, is the work team, the team that's working on this, are they going to try to assign scores, weighted scores?
Yeah, I'll answer that. So Ernest just came up with a matrix of this could be one way to score the projects. The city and SMART haven't weighed in on is this the matrix? Are these the percentages? It was just an idea of, this is one way to do it. So as I said, we're at the very beginning stages. We still need to look at this a little bit closer and go, do we want to rate it like this, or do we want to rate, have other things to explore? So we'll look into this further as we move forward.
Okay, well, based upon what you've just said, it doesn't appear that you're going to be ready to go back, or Bill's not going to be ready to go back to SMART within a month and ask the board to make a recommendation or make a decision, actually.
Yeah, it could take more than a month to
Yeah.
up. It just depends on how fast we get input and work on the report. And again, I'm going to go back and report to the board on, here's the feasibility study we did. Here's what we found. Some of these are probably going to be more feasible than others. And that's probably where we'll leave it.
Okay, do any other members have questions?
I've got a couple questions.
Okay.
First, Ernest, thank you. That was a wonderful presentation and laid it out very well. On your yellow segment, so the steep switchbacks, right around page 45, at the bottom, you had a potential diagram of sort of like 4 switchbacks in a row. There, right there. Yeah, exactly 45. Is there a, I think that's wonderful for bicycles. I think of this project as, as Kate mentions, the amenity of the trees and, just a really pleasant way to get through. As a pedestrian, if I were to encounter that, I would like stairs to make it more direct. Is there a possibility that you could add stairs to a switched back feature like that?
Most definitely. And this configuration looks more ominous than it need be on purpose, so that you see kind of the worst case. This is a 5%, but because these areas of the switchback act as rest areas, you can steepen the grades between these to 8% and still meet ADA. There's a whole dialogue that occurs with the cycling community. Do you want an 8% path? It's pretty steep going up Marydale, right? Not on the main portion of the road, is 26% on Marydale, which is definitely test your endurance. But for these switchbacks, there's still a lot of development of what the ideal sort of configuration is. And definitely you could have something that's much more pedestrian focused, like a stairway with rails coming up this side or wherever. But
yeah, I guess that would be my encouragement. So I ride the Marydale, I ride this section every day to work. And there's lots of people that walk up Marydale. I mean, there are people that walk through this, and this is certainly would be a very pleasant way to get through, separated from going the steep ways down Marydale and Pilgrim Way. I think are not nearly as pleasant of a experience to go through. And to think about pedestrians wanting a more direct route, I think you'd just get a lot more adoption. My other comment, you don't need to change any slide, but I did have concerns with the blue segment. So if you were to, whichever way you get down to the bottom of Marydale Road, if I think about the north-south Greenway as a whole, and my dream for it is that an all ages and abilities path, which is both the grade and just the comfort and separation from cars. I have 2 little girls. I think about riding this with my 5-year-old. Currently, my 5-year-old could start at the Madera Bridge, and I would feel very safe riding with her basically to downtown San Rafael, and we got to get through downtown San Rafael, but then on the path and, eventually all the way out to Mcginnis Park. But this particular blue segment, when I look at that, I'm like, well, I would not have my 5-year-old ride on North San Pedro Road there from Marydale to Los Ranchitos. And so just in my thought process, and I know much is being made of this weighted criteria, which I know it's not settled in anything, but I think the user experience you said was weighted heavily at 35%. I would weight that much higher than that. frankly, there's a way to get through right now. There's two ways to go on. I ride it every day. The reason we would do this is to make a really solid improvement. And I know this is just a feasibility study, but there's obviously one option that I think in terms of a solid improvement. The other two, I probably wouldn't ever even use myself. And a beautiful path along the smart right of way and then going down the hill is the thing that I think is, worth doing. And so I would just encourage when using that criteria to sort of to think about that. Thank you again. Great presentation. This is all exciting news.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Great feedback.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Phil. I believe Anne had a comment or a question.
Yes, I want to thank Phil and the others for their opinions, and I definitely agree with them, and I concur with Phil about the experience. I also do this path quite a bit. I don't feel comfortable with an 8-foot bicycle path. I don't feel like for an inexperienced cyclist and children that's wide enough. It's one thing when you're experienced cyclist, you're used to doing a lot of crazy things, but I think too, if you want the public to cycle and you want kids to cycle, you have to make it a 12-foot path. I feel like that's not a very good part of the Marydale plan. And I also concur with the blue segment trying to get attached to the other part of the Los Ranchitos Road is not safe for children anyway. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Anne. Barry?
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, thanks, Ernest. That was a really helpful presentation and a lot of really good work. I guess my question is just, I know we haven't gotten there yet, but the study's moving along. The recommendations will be, made and brought to the board. What is the process for looping the public in? And does that happen before it goes to the board? Does it happen after it goes to the board? Where can people weigh in on this?
We haven't talked about that too much, but I mean, that's a lot of the reason we're here today is to get your feedback and input. We also have plugged MCBC and WPTB TAM in early on also to kind of get user input and enthusiast input.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, I think that's, I agree with what Phil was saying about the importance of the user experience. I mean, it seems like that's a big reason to do the project at all. So, and I imagine when people who are excited about it are going to be commenting, that's really what they're going to be harping on. So obviously, cost and feasibility gets in there, but that's ultimately what is going to determine whether people actually use it or not. So, so thanks all of you for all your work, and looking forward to seeing this move forward.
Thank you, Barry. Are there any other member comments before we go to public comment? Seeing none, let's go to public comment.
Real quick, I just want to address a couple of the items brought up. All very good suggestions and maybe very feasible depending on the agency feedback and the right-of-way sort of users and the impacts to others. Just one example, totally appreciate, Phil, that you brought up the comment about this segment here on the screen. I did consider briefly an option to turn this sidewalk into a class 1 dedicated buffered path if you can take this parking out. If you want to keep the parking and shift the whole roadway over 10 feet to accommodate that, it looks like you kind of have the roadway width to do that. That's just a major change to how this roadway functions. And I didn't want to show any alternatives related to that because it would weigh on a lot more stakeholder input than I had really budgeted for in just this high-level feasibility report. So there's definitely more options. One of the constraints that comes to mind when you think about doing that is the introduction of like a mid-block crosswalk here at the Pilgrim Way crossing to get over onto that side. And so these things were conceptualized in my mind as I'm going through the study. And then my head just started to spin with, wow, well, Santa Fe's got to decide if they want to take all this parking along here and reconfigure the intersection to make that whole connection work better. It just started blowing up. The opportunities really start to blow up. So I think the purpose is just put all these options in front of the stakeholders, SMART and Santa Fe, have them analyze it and say, you know what, we do want to look at something like that, and further that, and just have a little bit more dialogue on it. So it's not meant to, this report is not meant to constrain people. It's just to sort of open their eyes to what I identified as the most feasible route, else opening it back up to really, looking at other options with major changes to the infrastructure.
I certainly appreciate that, and I understand that. My only little bit of a worry is I think it's pretty clear that that many of us on the BPAC have a preferred alternate. And if it were to be one of these paths that is to use the blue, I would start having very strong opinions about moving things forward. Now that weighs into the feasibility study because obviously those changes would make things very much more expensive. And so if you're starting to think about the proposals and you had some dollars, some little expected dollar amounts on there, for that blue option to be a feasible alternative, I would argue it would need that additional however much that big road would be. I know this is early, so we don't need to get into that, but I think I guess I hope that maybe we could have a little bit of input as things go further, and I think we certainly will. So I appreciate the process and all the thoughts that you put forward.
Yeah, and hopefully, just to reiterate, this is the summary table and executive summary. You have the tools to make those well-informed decisions about cost, the constraints needed to move forward for the different segments. So, future bike rider or existing bike rider, hi.
So let's go ahead and go to public comment. Lauren?
Sure. Matthew Hartzell.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Lauren. And thank you, Ernest, for Matthew Hartzell, WTD TAM. Thank you, Ernest, for your presentation this evening. I think you really gave everybody a really clear picture of what a lot of the options on the table are here. And thank you also to the City of San Rafael and to SMART for initiating and funding this study and taking this first important step on what hopefully is a long journey, well, not a long journey, but a journey to a new bike path connection that links the whole region and county. So I think there's been a lot of great points made tonight. I think I just want to reiterate a few of those points so we all really take them in. I think this study so far, the results are really good. They show us that basically all of these routes, the exception of the Pilgrim Way, which we all agree is not really an option, that all of these routes are feasible from an engineering standpoint. It's just a question of how many kind of engineering challenges there are, and they all have their own challenges in different ways, and those will take engineering solutions and money to work around, but they all are feasible. So now it's time to move on to the next steps. And I think I've already heard some direction, some preference from some of the BPAC members this evening about such as the weighting of the user experience. There's probably room for discussion around, is 35% appropriate or is something more, 50% or more? I would agree with the BPAC members who said the user experience probably ought to be weighted more than 35%. And there's room for discussion around these details, but I think not just feasibility, but I think the next steps, we can start looking at kind of maybe expand the definition of feasibility to think about the feasibility of the pathway user experience itself, its utility within the network, its connectivity to existing path to the rest of the North-South Greenway and other connecting paths, and its fidelity to the guiding principles of the SMART pathway, North-South Greenway, and of the study itself, such as, is it a class 1 pathway, continuous from start to finish, in which case we definitely, a section that was going to be on street as a class 2 might be weighted much lower. So I think the BPAC definitely has an opportunity to kind of to give guidance to the city about at this outset, what they see as some of their preferences, what they would like the city to weigh strongest on the matrix. I've heard a lot of good things and I can look forward to the rest of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew.
Just a reminder, you have 2 minutes for public comment. Jean Severinghouse.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Ernest, for quite a wonderful, thorough presentation. I very much support the comments that I would support the MTB TAM alignment, because what I'm looking for is a big jump up in user experience. And for me, the class 2 is a non-starter. It's not worth doing the project if you have to get on the street. And I also agree with Phil, the lower part of Marydale would be intimidating, and I don't care for going through that intersection at the bottom at all. That's a terrible intersection, no matter how I go through it on a bike. So I don't think we should be going down Marydale and through that intersection to do this. Whatever it takes, let's do it a better way than that. So, you know, user experience is like there's the pleasure of it, but we also know that 2/3 of people won't ride a bike on a street with a car. They won't share the street with a car. That's why they don't ride a bike. So if we're really going to try to make the North-South Greenway be good for people to share, then, you know, the 62% of people that need to be completely separated from cars and not be dealing with cars, then I'd say that let's make that user experience like 80%, 20% is the trees, and 60% is the being completely separated from cars on a class 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean.
Warren Wells.
Hey everyone, Warren Wells, Marin County Bike Coalition. I just wanted to thank SMART, City of Santa Fe and Zoom for all the work that's happened so far on this point. And you know, as Bill mentioned, they've looped MCBC and WTB TAM, and you know, I speaking personally have felt that our feedback is being heard by both the SMART and the city. So a big thanks for that. And importantly, I want to thank this body for elevating this particular project to Mayor Kate early last year, got moving through the SMART CIP. So without you, we wouldn't even be here. As far as our comments on the report, you know, our highest priorities for the pathway is creating an all ages and abilities pathway that closes the existing gap, something that I could ride on with my 68-year-old mom and my sister with her 2-year-old. You know, and to my eye, I think this is echoing what I've heard a lot of today, is that that's best achieved in the yellow route in the SMART Caltrans parcel. If the Marydale alignment were chosen, we would only feel comfortable if it provided a shared use path, fully separated on either the north-south side of the street, and significant reconfiguration of the intersection of North San Pedro Road and Marydale. You know, a class 2 paint-only lane on North San Pedro Road between Ranchitos and Marydale would be totally inadequate to meet that all ages and abilities standard. And I think my understanding is to do that class 1 path, you would have to remove some on-street parking there, which I think should not be a Herculean lift. One additional advantage to the SMART Caltrans alignment is that it entails about 20 feet less climbing, as North San Pedro Road travels downhill eastbound between Los Ranchitos to Marydale. Because of that additional climbing, it's also somewhat shorter, I think around 400 feet. I wasn't sure if that was in the study. And I really do want to draw attention to Member Mooney's comment. You know, when thinking about the weighting, actually this has been brought up by a few people at this point. You know, the user experience is the whole point, the whole purpose of the project. You know, if we aren't meeting that standard of being safe and comfortable for everyone, then there's probably another project that could use the money. You know, there's no sense in going halfway. So thank you all very much for your time and consideration. Really appreciate your work on this tonight.
Thank you, Warren.
Craig Murray.
So thank you for the good detail. And I do live on Marydale and in the area. I worked with Lauren in the past to increase the sensitivity of the lighting, the cameras at North San Pedro. It's important to see who your users are, and I really encourage all those that are involved in this to reach out to the neighboring communities for input. I think that's very important for this committee, as well as those professionals working on it. I do agree that it's user experience, but it needs to be direct, safe, and simple. Patrick Seidler took us through the MTB TAM area, and that seems to be a good user experience and something that would be an attribute to the North-South Greenway. It's very problematic. We've had 3 deaths in the area. 2 at the Los Ranchitos area, and 1 at the very end of this Marydale and North San Pedro. Those should raise the bar, just like Mr. Wells had mentioned, a recent death on Sir Francis Drake. And when I was in Greenway as a kid, we had a death that really focused on that Sir Francis Drake area. And it takes a long time to improve these segments. So I appreciate the focus. I still would like to see that connection to the Benicia Valley. Patrick had brought that up. The target audience is kids coming up this corridor. And I think that connection where it already connects over and then through the Meadows HOA area and to that south side of Smart at the Civic Center, that might be a great user experience. And I encourage you, although I realize there's project scope increased, but maybe looking at the connections and how this all works. And I'm gonna leave my time at 8 seconds on the table. Thank you, Ann. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Craig.
And Patrick.
Thank you very much. This is Patrick Seidler from WTB TAM. And I'd like to thank Ernest very much for his excellent presentation and looking and coming up with those alternatives, as well as SMART and working with SMART and the Santa Fe DPW, but also commend the Santa Fe BPAC for pushing this thing along. But most of all, the champion of this project really is Mayor Kate, who got this feasibility study done. And I think none of us can really should underestimate the importance of that and the possibilities that come from that. The 2 alternatives, Marydale alternative, and the Pilgrim alternative, creative, but they're really non-consistent user experiences. They're unsafe. They dump the Marydale one dumps the users down into a freeway interchange, and then there's no way to get safely up to the Greenway. So it kind of defeats the purpose of the Greenway completely. So I think one of the criteria should be user safety. And then the other one is what the voters tax themselves on: a bicycle pedestrian pathway alongside the railway. So I urge us to be really looking at the SMART Caltrans alternative, and I urge the BPAC to select the SMART Caltrans alternative as its preferred alternative. And what's going to happen is the study is going to be finished and then it's over. And so what we need to do is we need to keep advocating for it. And SMART's put in about $11 million to do environmental clearances, to do engineering and environmental permits for all the segments in Marin County and Sonoma County alongside the rail, with the exception of Habaneros. And once this feasibility study gets done, and hopefully we get the preferred alternative, is we can go to SMART and ask them to bring this segment to the same stage as all the other segments that SMART's doing in Marin and Sonoma County, and get the environmental 100% engineering, environmental permits. And the good news is the state of California is coming down $500 million. And if we get included in that group, this project is, we could be riding on this pathway down the SMART Caltrans alternative in the next 3 years. So take the bold move, go for the obvious selection. And we look forward to working with you on bringing this path to reality. Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you, Patrick. I don't see any more hands up for public comment.
Give it just a moment for anyone who did not speak. No hands.
Okay, I will close public comment. Would staff like to comment on any comments made by the public? If not, you want to comment? Okay.
No, unless you as chair want me to comment on anything, or us or SMART to comment on anything.
Yeah, just from SMART's perspective, we appreciate the feedback. I mean, I think it's a tremendous forum to get really thoughtful comments. So we appreciate all that. And I'm sure we'll be working with the city to incorporate a lot of this feedback.
Okay, members, do you have any final comments on this subject before we close out this item? Seeing none or hearing none, I will close the item. I want to thank Ernest and Bill for showing up and participating in the meeting. And also appreciate April and Lauren's comments representing the city.
Thank you. We'll see you out there on the road.
Okay.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Ernest.
All right.
Have a
All
good
right,
night.
bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
So we'll go to the next item, which is the APT grant application update. Lauren, are you going to give that, or is April?
That's me. Yeah, and I don't have any, well, I have one little visual I can show you, but I'm actually gonna piggyback and make this a more general grant application announcement. I can't remember if I mentioned it, but we are actively in the Canal Community-Based Transportation Plan, which is a very focused plan for the Canal neighborhood. And we've been having stakeholder working groups and technical working groups. We actually had our first stakeholder working group held completely in Spanish last night. And I think it's been a really great opportunity for folks living there to, be able to express how they feel and give their opinions on, transportation challenges in that neighborhood. Some of the things we heard was the street lighting is, they wish there was more street lighting in the neighborhood. And also a lot of comments about the buses. So maybe the lack of bus routes, especially the bus routes to Santa, for those who are going to Terra Linda High School. And then the cleanliness and the lighting at those shelters. So we hope to work with Marin Transit more and see how we can make those kind of improvements happen. But that's going well, and I'll be providing more of a report in our Friday memo, which is a report every other week that goes to City Council. So that's that.
Following up that meeting in the canal, are you planning on going back to them to have another meeting, maybe trying to address some of the concerns? I mean, maybe after you've talked to Marin Transit or explored what could be done to improve the lighting, would you go back to them and give them an update?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's the stakeholder working group, which is really residents of this community. And that's the meeting that was last night. And then there's also a technical working group. And so that's with Marin Transit, Golden Gate Transit, TAM sits on that, East San Rafael Chamber of Commerce. And so we plan to bring, what the stakeholders had to say back to our technical advisory group to see if we can come up with, the goal is to come up with like short-term, medium-term, and long-term solutions for this area so that we can go after quick build funding to take care of some of those short-term or like lower hanging fruits, and then have this plan. So then when the next grant opportunity comes up, we can say, this project is in this plan. It's really wanted by the community. We need money for it, or work it in, incorporate it into our CIP program. So plans are important for funding.
Great.
Any other questions on the Canal Community-Based Transportation Plan?
I'm assuming that bicycle and pedestrian issues are part of that discussion, but I'm guessing you probably are thinking this way already, but just because of the importance given by ATP and other grants for involving disadvantaged communities in like a very proactive way, just to be thinking kind of ahead on this. And if there's anything that does emerge and looks like you can, generate some support or interest to get some dialogue going in there now. I guess also the community-based transportation planning grants. They're all pushing the disadvantaged community piece so much. And it just sounds like this would be a great opportunity to, have that ongoing dialogue. So great. That sounds like good stuff.
Kate, you have your hand up?
Yes. My question, Lauren, is there a English translation of the transcript of the meeting? Because I think it would be really valuable to understand how that the canal, the community-based transportation plan in the canal integrates with the San Rafael's bicycle pedestrian master plan when we do the update. And I think it would be valuable to hear what residents and stakeholders are saying, because I felt like we didn't really get as much input on the master plan as we were hoping for. So that was one thing. And then what was the other thing? I guess that's the other thing is that it's a priority development area. And there will possibly be funding through MTC for meeting some of the planning efforts in that area. And I do think that all of the information that comes out of this, whether it's related to transit or lighting or other things, how the area can be improved as the priority development area planning goes forward. So how all these plans kind of layer on top of each other and inform each other is going to be really important.
Yeah, definitely. To answer your question, we will get the notes translated from the meeting yesterday, because that's, these stakeholder meetings are so important to the to building that community-based transportation plan. And they'll form a lot of the projects that we'll want to go after. So yes.
Thank you, Kate. If there are no other comments, the next item is possible future agenda items.
Oh, sorry, one more update that piggybacks on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Because the actual agenda item was ATP, Active Transportation Program. So the city is pursuing the Canal Swing Bridge project. We actually applied for the last ATP cycle, and we were able to get really great feedback from the scoring team. And they said, you did this, this, and this really well. They did say some of our outreach seemed a little bit outdated. So the community-based transportation plan outreach is very timely, and we plan to include that in our Swing Bridge application. And that would basically connect the close to the intersection of Canal and Harbor Street. So kind of the top corner of the canal over to 3rd and Embarcadero. And that would really benefit, like a huge safe routes to school benefit, because it gets kids right there instead of having to go out to Francisco East and up and over. So those are due, applications are due mid-June. We'll have a consultant team help us because ATP applications are really, really intense and they require a lot of data.
Is that, what kind of grant is that? Does that go to the feds or the state or?
ATP is federal.
Okay.
So there's a lot of requirements and extra admin work that goes into that.
And once the grant's submitted, what kind of turnaround time is before you find out whether it's been accepted?
It's a couple months. We should know by the end of the year. I would say it's like a 5-month review process.
Great. Okay, are you done on this item?
Yeah, it looks like someone raised their hand. So
Okay,
you want to move to public comment for this item?
sure.
Okay. Matthew Hartzell.
Hi, yes, thanks, Lauren. I'm really excited about the Canal Swing Bridge application. I just have a quick question, and that is, what percent engineering would be considered required for the application? Like, is it as 10% or 30% or not even that much? Or?
That is a great question. If April doesn't know the answer, we're gonna have to get back to you.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually don't think you have to have any percentage of design because we're actually requesting design funds for the project.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Matthew. So seeing no other hands, we'll go on to the next item. Possible future agenda items. Do any board members or any members have suggestions?
Actually, I have partly it's a question and I guess, and also potential future agenda item. I know we talk a lot about specific facilities and recommendations and things that were in the plan. Does the city have any kind of traffic calming policy? Or, I mean, I've been thinking a bit more about it because since since the was it AB 43 passed, which will give the local jurisdictions the ability to lower speed limits more than what has traditionally been allowed, and just sort of thinking about, well, what can we do more across the board to make streets more bicycle and pedestrian friendly, aside from actually building new facilities. So so just be interested to hear if the city has something in place, or maybe that's something we want to build into the next update of the bicycle pedestrian plan.
I can kind of answer that right now. We don't have a traffic calming policy. Our toolbox is a little bit limited in that we get a lot of requests for speed bumps or cushions, and they're just not supported by all departments at the city. But that could be something, yeah, that could be something that we include as part of the next Bike and Ped Master Plan update, which is, I can't believe it, but 5 years will be next summer. Or it also feels kind of like a Vision Zero element to me. You know, you want to track, you know, calm neighborhood streets and stuff like that. So no, great topic though.
Also a comment, my understanding is that piece of legislation does not become effective until 2024.
The speed limit.
Yeah, I think there's
that's my
supposed, I forget,
understanding.
there's some kind of a tool that's being developed, or I forget what it is, but yeah, it's not immediate.
It's like if you already have these designated streets, because I think San Francisco is already taking care of that by lowering speed limits, or Caltrans has to like designate streets for you, and that may take until 2024. It's very convoluted language, but that was my understanding, is we can't really take action for a few years.
Any other comments, suggestions?
I think that if they're on a high injury network, which I'm not sure what San Rafael has for high injury networks, but I think that they're lowering some speeds on some identified areas where there have been injuries. I'm wondering if there's any updates from the transit center relocation, and it seems like we're making progress. We're moving forward on this segment on the top of Puerto Zuelo Hill down to North San Pedro Road. And I would really like to see us move forward on a concept from Second to Mission through downtown, that segment of the North-South Greenway. And what are the possibilities there? What are the quick build possibilities? What are some of the other midterm, longer term possibilities? It is an area of change with the downtown precise plan, and so there will be opportunities in the future to consider infrastructure as it develops and changes over time. So I think by starting to discuss it now, we'd be getting ahead of the 8 ball a little bit. As some projects are proposed down there. And then the other thing that I just wanted to mention is that when we embarked on the last master plan update, we did so a year or two before it was due to be adopted. So I think that it takes like a year. I think we did it was significantly, updated last time, and maybe that's not going to happen as much this time, but I think calendaring it, and in terms of a commitment from BPAC, also last time, there were times during the process of the update where we met every month instead of bi-monthly, just in order to stay on track with the process and get it adopted in a timely way.
Lauren, for the next meeting, do you think you could agendize this item and bring back to us a preliminary schedule for the components that are necessary for getting this plan? You probably have to hire a consultant and identify funding, and then the consultant would have to do the plan. If you could come up with a kind of a tentative schedule so that we'll have a good idea as to what kind of time frame is needed on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I've already worked with April to make sure
Great.
Funding is put aside for this plan. And we know it's going to take a year at least. So the plan was to start that this summer.
That's terrific. Thank you. Seeing no other member comments, it looks like Warren Wells has a comment.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Haggerty. A couple items. On the something you mentioned, Lauren, was that in response to the question about traffic calming, you mentioned that there is not agreement among treatment among city agencies with regard to treatment, and I was wondering, whether a future agenda item might be how do we get agreement among city agencies for traffic calming treatments. This is something that has happened in other jurisdictions, and traffic works the same in San Rafael as it does anywhere else. So I think that would be a fruitful item to pursue, because I'll stop there. Second item is on AB 43. I just want to correct something, Chair Haggerty, you mentioned about what can be implemented with AB 43 currently. So you'll see that both San Francisco and the city of Oakland now are implementing slower speed limits on areas that are considered business districts. This is business activity district. This is section 9 of the bill. So that applies immediately. The rest of the bill outside of business activity districts will only come into effect pending Caltrans describing certain safety corridors. So I just wanted to point that out, that we could go ahead with that in business activity districts, which I think many of our problem areas in San Rafael could be considered as such. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Warren. Thank you for that clarification. Seeing no other comments, I'd like to move that we adjourn the meeting. It is now 7:43.
Early. I don't think that's ever happened to me yet.
Yeah, all in favor?
You guys okay?
Aye.
Good meeting, Kevin.
Thank you all for your comments. We'll see you in 2 months.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.